In today's video, we're going to be picking every single Week 11 college football game, as usual, using this beautiful website, Playoff Predictors. The season is really coming to a head here. We got the first ever college football playoff rankings, which was a pretty exciting event. I'm critical of the rankings. I don't like how they're structured. I think it should just be one at the end of the year. I made a video about that, blah, blah, blah. You can go take a look at it if you want. But it's still exciting to finally see what the committee actually thinks things are looking like, and it gives us more of a context to the actual stakes of some of these games here. And there's some goodies this week. I mean, I'm pretty hyped to get through and pick this entire slate, so let's just get into it. We've had a couple MACtion games occur by the time this video posts. These two will be wrapped up as well, the Wednesday games, because this video will go up on Thursday. But we saw Bowling Green and Miami of Ohio go on the road and get victories. For Mike New at Ball State, he's got to win another one or two of these games down the stretch. And you start to wonder if Jim McElwain may be on the hot seat at Central Michigan. But Bowling Green, Miami of Ohio, still both definitely alive in the MAC conference title race. So we've got a couple more MAC games to talk about. Ohio at Kent State and NIU at Western Michigan on a Wednesday. It is just such an amazing feeling to have MACtion, I should say, going on early in these weeks. And the fact that there's football games today as I'm recording this video, it just really puts a warm feeling in the heart. There's no way Kent State beats Ohio. Tim Albin's Ohio squad has been very nice this season. Really awesome to see these guys getting up and having a good year in what was supposed to be a down year for a team that didn't return a ton of production. And as the season starts to come to a close, as we're on the home stretch here, Ohio's turning in a really nice year. They take care of business versus a winless Kent State team. They're bowl eligible at least, and could push for maybe a sneaky MAC conference title shot. So Ohio had a down year in there or two, but they've really bounced back. We've got NIU at Western Michigan. This one's really interesting and actually one of my favorite matchups. Western Michigan undefeated in conference play at the top of the MAC standings right now, and they face an NIU team that has been up and down this season. They're back to 500, and I don't know if they'll still have a MAC title shot, but this is the type of game that they've got to get. Western Michigan's had a lot going right for them recently, but I don't think they're truly as battle-tested as NIU, so I look for a road sweep for these MAC games in the early week action. I think NIU finds a way to beat Western Michigan. We've got App State on the road versus Coastal Carolina on a Thursday night showcase here. Coastal Carolina had a pretty disappointing week last week, losing to Troy, their worst loss of the season by far. We saw App State getting a nice win. So two teams kind of trending in opposite directions right now. Both had pretty high expectations going into the season. Coastal Carolina now 1-3 in Sun Belt play. And so both have been pretty disappointing, but I think Tim Beck's squad with their backs against the wall on the teal turf get the victory here against an App State team that's starting to figure some things out, but I do think Coastal can put an end to that. FAU goes on the road to play East Carolina. East Carolina has already fired Mike Houston. Could this be Tom Herman's last game if they lose to a not-so-great East Carolina team? I think FAU in desperation mode. They played a solid half of football versus South Florida. I think that they show up and get the victory here versus an East Carolina team that has been very up and down, and at the end of the day, just hasn't met their expectations, hasn't been a very good team, and without the stability of a head coach, I think they will lose at home. Not really liking a few weeks after they've had the interim where reality is starting to set in. I typically like a team like 1 week after with an interim, which was Rice last week. I didn't pick them straight up versus Navy, I don't think, but I did pick them to cover at the very least, and they ended up pulling the outright upset. We've got Cal on the road versus Wake Forest as one of these 4 Friday games. Pretty exciting. I might have an individual video going out on TikTok for the results of these games, but this one's interesting. I think Wake Forest should cover, should keep this close against Cal, but at the end of the day, I do just think Cal is a better team. Wake Forest has been playing some underrated ball out there in the ACC, and I really think it's been kind of a resurgence after that early loss to Louisiana to get Dave Clawson's squad back on track. And they could totally push for a bowl game, but at the very least, I think they've shown some signs of life to suggest that Clawson is still their guy, and in this era, he can still find a way to get together a roster that can win. And for Wilcox, it feels like this Cal team, they're so good, they have to at least make a bowl game. So a lot of pressure on both of those head coaches. Iowa on the road versus UCLA. The Bruins finally put it all together against Nebraska, got that nice solid win to Sean Foster, maybe carving out a foothold in the Big Ten, but I still think Iowa under Brendan Sullivan, they've just been so much better offensively, and they were already pretty good this season. The resurgence their offense has had this season has been a testament to the coaching changes that they've made, and also they've just been healthier offensively speaking. So look for Caleb Johnson to run all over the place. I like Iowa to win. I like Iowa to cover -5.5 in that Big Ten showdown. Rice on the road versus Memphis. Where is Rice's encore with their interim head coach and with this team that just pulled off a big-time upset against Navy? I don't think it happens against Memphis. Memphis has been pretty disappointing. They fell, I believe, last week was where they lost in upset fashion. I wish I could recall who they lost to, and I apologize to whoever pulled that win off. But I think that Memphis takes out Rice. I think Rice loses a little bit of the momentum from that monumentous win. And like I said, after the first game or two of an interim head coach, I just think the momentum dies down a little bit. The honeymoon phase is kind of over, and I think Memphis will start that spiral for what is a talented Rice team that could have a shot here. I don't know if I would take Memphis against the spread confidently, especially with how their defense has looked this season. We've got New Mexico on the road versus San Diego State. Little interesting battle here. Bronco Mendenhall, what a job he's done in just his first year at New Mexico. He has still got it. He's going to take New Mexico and I think long-term really do some great stuff, especially in a weakened Mountain West in the coming seasons. And I'm really excited to see what he can do long-term there. And I think he could end up back in a power coaching position. That's how things are looking for him right now, I think. Because if people see Bronco Mendenhall still has it, they're going to want him. But San Diego State has been solid. They've been sort of hot and cold this year. They got bullied by Boise State last week, but who hasn't been? They're a physical team, and coming off of a physical game, wouldn't be surprised if New Mexico can keep this one close early, but I like San Diego State to end up pulling it out. Syracuse at Boston College is our first Saturday game we'll be picking here. Boston College opens as a slight favorite in this one, which is surprising to me because Syracuse has looked really good. I know McCord is pretty turnover prone, and that's added some volatility to their recent results, including that Pitt game. But they really showed out in that second half versus Virginia Tech. They were opportunistic. I think they're going to get a nice win on the road versus a Boston College team that has sort of been floundering and struggling since their hot start to the season. I believe they're 4-4. This would drop them to 4-5 and put a bowl game in real jeopardy for Bill O'Brien's first season with Boston College. Miami goes on the road to play Georgia Tech at another ACC battle. This one's a little nerve-wracking if you're a Miami fan. You're on the road versus a team that sort of has a reputation under their current regime and staff of pulling off upsets, especially against ranked ACC teams. It's a team that beat them last season due to that crazy fumble and crazy turn of events. So maybe some deja vu here. They're undefeated. I think they'll still find a way to win. Their defense has been an absolute liability, but their offense has proven it can bail them out of essentially any situation this season. And I just don't think Georgia Tech has the mettle to match Miami. And I do think it's a Georgia Tech team that's been a little beat up this season. So give me the Hurricanes to pull out the victory there. Purdue at Ohio State. Do the spoiler makers have it in them? I don't think so. They might end the season with only one win, which is pretty baffling in Ryan Walter's second season. Buckeyes coming off a big win over Ohio State. Maybe they come out sluggish. Maybe they don't. It is a physical game they just played against Penn State. Attrition starting to take place, but Ohio State certainly a roster and a program built to withstand the attrition at this point in the season. Minnesota travels on the road to play Rutgers. The Scarlet Knights have had their season kind of get away from them to the point where they're questioning whether or not they can make a bowl game. And Minnesota, how about reviving a season? They are on a roll right now. 4 straight wins for the Golden Gophers. I think they make it 5 in this game, which I believe is the stat, 4 or 5. I believe it was 3 straight wins going into last week if they beat Illinois on the road. So I think it's at 4, and this could be 5 in a row for Minnesota. And there's 2 ranked wins in there, Illinois and USC as well. So Minnesota's been extremely impressive. I think they get another win here. And talk about a resurgent season for PJ Fleck and company, really erasing any doubts of job security and any doubts of who is the coach of the future for Minnesota. He's really rejuvenated this team, and shout out to Darius Taylor, who's just been running all over defenses during this stretch. West Virginia on the road versus Cincinnati. The Bearcats have been a pleasant surprise in the Big 12. West Virginia may be a little bit of a disappointment, but I really like how the Mountaineers have been playing recently, and I think they're going to step up and get a road victory at Cincinnati. Cincinnati's been playing really well. Sorsby's been great, but I do think that win over Arizona State, kind of a signature win, a little bit dampered when you realize Sam Levitt wasn't playing. They were playing against Jeff Sims. It was a much different ASU team, and I think against a team like West Virginia of their caliber, the Mountaineers have had a lot of bad breaks this season. I think things will finally break in the right direction for them, and they'll get a road victory at Nippert. Texas State goes on the road to play Louisiana Monroe. This one, an interesting battle. UL Monroe has also won a lot of close, tight games. They've proven they have sort of an extra oomph this season. Texas State has lost some bad ones, some ones that really feels like they shouldn't be losing with how good of a position they were in this year. They've now lost to Louisiana. They lost to Old Dominion. A couple conference losses, and all of a sudden, their conference title hopes are kind of in jeopardy. I still think they'll get this win here, though. They are beat up. They are suffering a lot of injuries. I don't know what McLeod's status is. He could be out for the season, so that could be a dumb statement by me. I'm not too up to date on his status. I just know he didn't play last game, and that affected them down the stretch. So give me Texas State to get a close win on the road versus ULM. Navy goes on the road to play South Florida. Navy is a team that's kind of trending in the wrong direction right now. They played a physical game against Notre Dame and lost. They get beat by Rice last week. And South Florida is a team that's playing really well. Their record is pretty deceiving right now. It's a little worse than it really should be for the caliber of team South Florida is. They just had to play Miami and Alabama early in the season and had some other tests like playing Tulane really early as well. So I like South Florida to get the win here and beat up on Navy and hand Navy their third loss of the season, which is pretty nuts considering they were undefeated just a few weeks ago. So give me Alex Golish's squad. We've got Florida on the road versus Texas, our first SEC battle we're picking here. The Gators has been the same story for several weeks. They're super beat up. The injury bug biting them really bad. I think at this point, if you're Florida, you know whether or not you're keeping or firing Billy Napier, because right now this team is not a reflection of him. This is a very battered team. I think they could come out inspired and play close. They had an inspired drive late versus Georgia where they went and scored a touchdown with basically a bunch of scrubs in there. But give me the Longhorns at home. They just can beat you in so many ways. I don't really see the scenario where Florida throws something at Texas that they're not ready for and they can't respond to. So Texas should win, and I do think Florida might cover. It's like 22.5 right now. It's a pretty big spread. Liberty on the road versus Middle Tennessee. Will the bleeding stop for Liberty this week? I think they're still a decent CUSA team, and they'll still finish in like that top four-ish in the CUSA. They should beat Middle Tennessee here, but I can't say that they're better than Western Kentucky or Jacksonville State or Sam Houston, which are all the other teams that are up there. Liberty still has to play, I believe, two of those teams. They already lost to Jacksonville State just last week, so we'll see. I did pick Jacksonville State in that one, so shout out to them. UConn goes on the road to play UAB. They've been a much better team at home than they have been away this season, and they have 3 losses, all the power conference opponents. UAB has been really bad, but suddenly had a spark, destroys Tulsa last week. I still think UConn can take this squad and go on the road and get a win, which would get win number 7 for Jim Mora, which would be the most during the regular season for him at UConn. They've clinched 2 bowl games in 3 seasons, which if you consider how terrible UConn was, Jim Mora has done one heck of a job with these Huskies, and it's just really impressive to see. Marshall going on the road to play Southern Miss. Southern Miss definitely in the middle of a lost season. Marshall getting a solid win last week. I think they get another solid victory. You look back to that lead they choked versus Georgia Southern, they could be in such a better spot right now, and instead they're not. Southern Miss, not much to say about these guys, firing Will Hall and just trending in the wrong direction after raking in the number 1 recruiting class in the Sun Belt and one of the most impressive portal classes. It's sad to see what has happened to Southern Miss with the talent on this roster, and I hope whoever comes in here can reharness it, because Southern Miss typically been a pretty proud Group of 5 program. There's a lot of those that are in tough spots right now. Michigan goes on the road to play Indiana. Indiana, something crazy like only 10 wins versus Michigan all time. They should be favored here. They should win here. The Wolverines are also a battered squad that offensively just doesn't instill any faith in you. Defensively, they have some things to like, but I think Indiana's going to step up and get another really great win. They have stepped up and been ready whenever they played a team that is in this similar tier and caliber to Michigan. And really, we're going to learn the most about Indiana when they finally play the Ohio State Buckeyes. Georgia State goes on the road to play James Madison. James Madison is a team that at this point only has 2 losses and is in a pretty good position. Georgia State has kind of fallen off the map almost entirely after that win over Vanderbilt, which aged really incredibly well for them, but everything else has aged pretty poorly. They've sort of just crumbled in conference play, and they really lost a lot from this team from last season, which is sad to see them falling off after what was really a signature season for them last season. Iowa State goes on the road to play Kansas. The Cyclones having a lapse against Texas Tech. They had too many close wins in a row, but their defense, I think, will step up versus a Kansas offense that's been pretty, very inconsistent and very disappointing this season. So I like the Cyclones to step up and get a win here, even though that Kansas secondary is pretty good and will test them and force Iowa State to probably run the football. I like the Cyclones' chances in this one of getting a bounce-back victory. Duke goes on the road to play NC State. NC State has had a pretty disastrous season by their preseason expectations, and Duke has really just gotten every ball to bounce their way this season. I think they're going to continue that trend at NC State, get a victory here. The fact that they tested teams like SMU and Miami as much as they did the last couple of weeks by being opportunistic and just playing well has been really impressive to me. So I think they'll get the win here on the road. We've got San Jose State at Oregon State. My goodness, Oregon State, the war of attrition has been a battle they've been losing, and their depth is not great this season, and that's the reason that they've been stuck with 4 losses, including a bad loss to Nevada in there. And San Jose State has been a team that has managed to get some good wins, but if you look at the caliber of wins San Jose State has gotten this season, they, I don't think, are quite on that same level, and so I do think the Beavs should be able to come out with a victory here. I know they're just a short underdog or short favorite in this game at home, but it just really feels like San Jose State's talent level isn't to the level it needs to be here. But who knows? They took Washington State to overtime earlier this season, but attrition is something that not just Oregon State is facing. San Jose State is facing that as well at this point in the season. I think the Beavs will find a way to get the job done there. Georgia on the road versus Ole Miss. This is a marquee matchup, one of the biggest matchups of the weekend. Huge SEC battle. And I just think Ole Miss at home, they just dropped 63 on Arkansas on the road. I think they're playing really well. I think a lot of people have written off Ole Miss after those 2 early season losses, and it doesn't change how much talent is on this team and how good they are. I think everybody's still bought in with Ole Miss, and the only reason I would fade them at this point in the season is if I thought all their talent was not bought in, but I think they are. And so I like them at home against a Georgia team that, can you really trust them right now? Carson Beck is throwing picks left and right. They've been really sloppy offensively. It doesn't feel like your typical vintage Georgia team, and for that reason, I think they could lose a game that vintage Georgia wouldn't typically lose, and that's one on the road versus Ole Miss. Army travels on the road to play North Texas. North Texas is a team that has been really good, but just hasn't been able to get a signature victory versus one of those top tier teams. I believe Bryson Daly will be back for Army after being ruled out very late against Air Force. They still won that game 20-3. I think their defense will step up and make some good stops against North Texas, and I think offensively they should be pretty potent and get the win. Even if Daly's not in, I actually still think Army finds a way to just win this football game. North Texas has just been incapable of closing out those big games this season. Clemson goes on the road to play Virginia Tech. The Hokies are a team that was in a good position, loses in overtime last week. I thought Colin Schley still played fine at quarterback. I don't know if it'll be him or Drones leading the way, but either way, I do think the Clemson Tigers are capable of getting a bounce-back victory here. It was such a disaster last week. They had a bunch of special teams errors. They lose at home big time to a Louisville team that has been waiting to pop off. I think they find a way to get this win in Lane Stadium, beat the Hokies, and end the nightmare that has been this last week of discussion. Dabo Swinney in general, though, at Clemson, I don't know what his future holds after a loss like that to Louisville. If they lose to Virginia Tech, too, there will certainly be some conversations, but I think their offense will bounce back and they'll get a win here. Colorado travels on the road to Lubbock to play Texas Tech. The Red Raiders getting a signature win on the road against Iowa State last week on that touchdown with under 30 seconds to play. Super impressive stuff from the Red Raiders, whose defense has been so hot and cold, inconsistent this year. I mean, just think of the variance in performances they've had this season. They've shut down offenses like Arizona and an Iowa State offense that had been doing decently well this season, but then they've given up boatloads of points to teams like North Texas and Abilene Christian and Baylor. They surrendered 59. So it's been really interesting. And against Colorado, it's going to be especially interesting. It's a Buffalo's offense that can hurt you really bad, a defense that's played well and could affect Baron Morton in this Texas Tech offense if Morton is back and healthy. And I think Texas Tech finds a way to get this win, pull off another unlikely victory in what would be another ranked victory for the Red Raiders in Lubbock. Lubbock is also a really tough place to play, so that factors in for me as well. We've got Temple on the road versus Tulane. Tulane covering Merchants and just a really good team for John Summerall. There's no scenario where they lose to a Temple team that's shown some signs of life this season. Kennesaw State on the road versus UTEP. Man, UTEP has been super disappointing this season. I think I've picked them 3 or 4 times. They are at 1 win on the season. Really ugly stuff for year 1 under Scotty Walden. Kennesaw State, with that win over Liberty, it feels like maybe they found something. Maybe something could happen here. And Southern Utah's beaten UTEP here, so I wouldn't put anything past them. So I actually think I'm going to pick Kennesaw State here. They're kind of the more trendy team at this point. UTEP has shown some things, but it just feels like not good football being played in El Paso right now, and hopefully they'll remedy that down the stretch because I'm rooting for UTEP, and I have a dynasty in college football 25 on UTEP, so naturally that makes me root for them a little bit more. South Carolina travels on the road to play Vanderbilt. Neither of these two teams ranked in the top 25 in the CFP, which I think is a little garbage, especially because Missouri's ranked. But give me South Carolina to go on the road, beat the doors, and Vanderbilt's a team that's been doubted several times. They were double-digit underdogs to both Kentucky and Auburn. They found a way to win both of those games. This isn't your typical Vandy team. This isn't your typical Cinderella story. This is a legit Vanderbilt squad that is a serious competitor in the SEC, which is pretty crazy to think. They haven't had that since those days under James Franklin, his last couple of seasons there. But these Gamecocks, pretty undeniable what they just did, the way they beat the brakes off of Texas A&M. So I think they can continue to do that. This pass rush should harass Pavia and the Vanderbilt offense, and I think they'll get the job done on the road. But who knows? Maybe Vandy just needs me to doubt them again so they can rack up another win and get to 7, which would be absolutely nuts. But we'll see what happens down the stretch. We've got Jacksonville State on the road versus Louisiana Tech. Louisiana Tech has been playing considerably better in the last couple of weeks. I think that's fair to say, but Jacksonville State has been playing better than anyone in the CUSA, so I think they get a win, and Cumbie could still be in trouble and danger of losing his job this year. I believe they're still sitting at that 3-win mark that they've had each of the previous 2 seasons, so I think they need to at least surpass that by a couple games in order to save his job. Jacksonville State, meanwhile, Rich Rod squad, well on their way to a CUSA championship game, I think. Arkansas State travels on the road to play Louisiana. The Ragin' Cajuns, a team that is undefeated, or has one loss to Tulane, I should say. They're undefeated in Sun Belt play. They host a solid Butch Jones Arkansas State squad that is also still vying for a spot in there to win that division. But I think Louisiana gets the home victory. They've just been so reliable this season. They've been really impressive a lot of the year. They're basically, a crazy touchdown late against Tulane. Away from being an undefeated team this season, and they're certainly still on the Group of 5 representative playoff radar, so that's a pretty cool thing over there in the Sun Belt. Western Kentucky on the road versus New Mexico State. It's been a bad season for the Aggies. Western Kentucky's a really good squad. Their only 2 losses are by 1 point to Boston College and to Alabama, and I think Tyson Helton's squad gets another victory here on the road. They shouldn't have any real issues at New Mexico State. UCF travels to play Arizona State. The Sun Devils in an interesting spot. Sam Levitt's back, but Cam Scatabo could be out with an injury, which would be a tough blow. However, they have a really deep running back room. DeCarlos Brooks is another guy in there that I think could absolutely step up for them. And they've been really potent offensively as long as Levitt is in the game. And I think having him in there will be a big-time effect, even if you're not having Scatabo break off those big runs he's used to. Their O-line play has been pretty great this year. And defensively, they've been opportunistic. They've done what they've had to do. Central Florida, meanwhile, they have been nothing as advertised. I mean, they were expected to be a lot better offensively this season. They've gone through like 4 different quarterbacks with very little injuries occurring. It's literally just been benchings and restartings. Ja'Cory Brown, KJ Jefferson in the mix there. They just haven't been able to find their guy. And defensively, they've been pretty disappointing as well. They were expected to make a lot of noise after some late portal action, but give me Arizona State to beat UCF at home. Oklahoma State travels on the road to play TCU. The Cowboys still have 0 conference wins. Pretty bizarre stuff. TCU losing a game to Baylor on a last-second field goal. They had figured a lot of stuff out. They still haven't clinched a bowl game. I think they'll do so versus a bad Oklahoma State team that TCU would love nothing more than to just beat the brakes off of, kicking a team while they're down. I mean, Oklahoma State has just been a complete dumpster fire. I was pretty low on them. Didn't really have them as a top 25 team, and yet I was still too generous to what they've been this season. Maryland on the road versus Oregon. This one's a pedestrian game I haven't thought a ton about because Oregon's probably going to splatter Maryland. This is just a bad spot for Maryland. Not a team that's been too trendy or too much of a team to trust this season, and I just think they will get absolutely splattered in Austin. Sorry to Maryland. Mississippi State travels on the road to play Tennessee. The Volunteers, solid team, still looking to be in playoff contention. They were in the playoff picture in those first rankings, and they should get another win versus the Mississippi State team. It's not great. Keep an eye on this game, though. Mississippi State has tested a few teams that are in the top 25 this season and had the game at least competitive late, and so maybe they could do that versus Tennessee here, but I don't honestly see many pathways for that, especially if Tennessee can get it rolling offensively early. Alabama on the road versus LSU. It's a huge game, night game in Death Valley. I think the Tigers are ready, and I think they're playing pretty good football. I know they collapsed in the second half versus Texas A&M, but I think that Alabama's not the type of team this year under Kalen DeBoer that has shown a ton of resilience. I don't think that'll be the thing under Kalen DeBoer that we say his whole time there. This is just his first season, and he doesn't have everyone there that he needs to have, and Brian Kelly, year 3 LSU. I trust them at home to get a victory here, continue to push for an SEC championship game appearance, and continue to push for a potential playoff appearance as well. Florida State goes on the road to play Notre Dame, the Fighting Irish, a team with still only one loss to NIU. So maybe they're susceptible to an upset, especially at home against Florida State. But no, Florida State is so lifeless this year. It's been really pathetic to watch. Only one win on the whole season, which is unfathomable. And I just think the psychological warfare going on with the Noles, it's clear the locker room is lost, the team is lost this season, and Norvell's going to have to do some battling next year to get them back on track with how disastrous this season has been. Notre Dame should get a win here in what was considered to be one of their biggest games when we were looking at it in the offseason. Instead, it's not. It's just like them against basically Central Michigan, it might as well be. Oklahoma travels on the road to play Missouri. Missouri and Oklahoma have both been really disappointing over the last couple of weeks. Missouri somehow, some way in the college football playoff top 25. Really baffling. If you're going off of eye test to justify Indiana as high as they are, you got to drop Missouri based on the eye test. They've looked awful. And I think Oklahoma is a team backs against the wall, coming off a nice win against Maine, a get-right game. I think they're going to come out, play well, and beat Missouri on the road, get a nice top 25 victory on the resume. It's an old rivalry game as well. I think it'll be emotional. I think the Sooners will just find a way to win this one in a close battle and get a nice quality victory that could get them in a position to still make a bowl game despite how disastrous things were. In fact, I think this would be win number 6 for them. Trying to find it on the left side there. Yeah, this would put them at 6-4. So they would clinch a bowl game with a win here. I think this is where they get it. Nevada on the road versus Boise State. Broncos are going to win on the blue turf, but I do think that Nevada could make this game a little interesting early. Maybe could cover that big spread. They've been physical. They've been battling with good teams all season long. They sort of play with a chip on their shoulder. It's been nice to see, but Boise State should get the win despite the fact that they're a little beat up right now, especially Aston Genty. He's been a little battered over the last couple of weeks, but look for him to try to continue to build that Heisman case. We've got Washington on the road versus Penn State. The Huskies coming off a nice win over USC. They've sort of gotten their season back on track a little bit. And Penn State coming off their loss against Ohio State. They're back home again, and I think that they'll get the victory here. But the Huskies could show up and maybe test Penn State, show them some things early that maybe test them. Their offense has been pretty potent this season. Maybe they could expose some things with Penn State. Gotta wonder psychologically what's happening to the Nittany Lions after losing another game like that they've been so used to losing. Virginia on the road versus Pitt. Pitt coming off of their first loss of the season versus SMU. They kind of got body bagged in that game. But Virginia under Tony Elliott kind of trending in the wrong direction. They were sitting, I believe, at like 4-1. They've dropped 3 in a row. They're in a pretty tough spot now, and Pitt has been playing well. I think their offense could bounce back in this game after it struggling through the last couple of weeks, sort of sleepwalking a little bit. I think they'll figure it out. I think they'll beat Virginia. UNLV goes on the road to play Hawaii. Rainbow Warriors have 2 wins in a row in Mountain West play. They're certainly capable of pulling off an upset like this with the way they're playing right now. But I do think UNLV just finds a way to get the W here and avoid what would be a pretty tough loss considering how magical their season has been for them this season. And they're still trying to push for a Mountain West title spot. Colorado State might have something to say about that, but they're still in position to do so if Colorado State slips up. Fresno State goes on the road to play Air Force. Air Force is a team that's really struggled this year. It's been really rough. Fresno State coming off a loss to Hawaii on a last-minute touchdown. I think Fresno State gets a little bounce-back action here against Air Force, which has been a team that teams have typically bounced back against this season. Air Force, it's just been pretty ugly, honestly. BYU goes on the road to play Utah. Dangerous game. I mean, just think of the context of this game. A rivalry game, one rival, Utah at home, had high expectations, and it's a disaster. Nothing is going right. They have 4 losses. BYU, undefeated, having their dream season. Everything is going right. Utah would love nothing more than to derail their season, derail their playoff hopes, derail so much about this season for BYU, and they could do it at home at night in Rice-Eccles Stadium. That's going to be an electric environment. Could Utah do it? Absolutely. Will they? I'm going to say no. I think BYU just finds a way to win it again. They've been doing it all year. They've been opportunistic. They've been physical. They've been everything that people thought Utah would be this season, and I think they go beat the Utes on the road, which would be a huge victory. And then finally, Utah State at Washington State. Cougars trying to keep those slim playoff hopes alive. They were 21st in the college football playoff rankings, so they're on the radar, and I think they can get another win here at home against Utah State. The Aggies, a team that have not been very good this season. So Washington State getting the victory. That wraps it up. That is every single pick for Week 11. And I'm pretty excited for this slate. It's going to be pretty monstrous. I do, unfortunately, have a fall wedding I have to go to, but it'll just be for the morning slate, hopefully, or for part of the morning slate. I know it's a cardinal sin, and I tried my best, but We're in it. It's going to happen. We just got to embrace the chaos, I suppose. But let me know down in the comments if you enjoy this video, what picks you're rocking with, what picks you disagree with, and if you enjoy the video. Like, comment, subscribe, do all that good stuff. I would greatly appreciate it. And that's pretty much all I got for you guys. I'm super excited to do this video. I look forward to it every week. And I will see you guys later next week.